Recording in progress.
and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to welcome you all to the 15th East Asia Conference, or EAC. I'm Nannari Suksambun, your MC for this event. Today, I'm excited to be able to welcome delegates from competition authorities from East Asia and also reviewing authorities from Thailand. And now, without further ado, it is my great honor to welcome Chairperson of Trade Competition Commission of Thailand, Mr. Maitri Suthepakul, to deliver the opening remarks of the event.
Mr. Kazuyuki Furuya, Chair and Japan Fair Trade Commission, Mr. Sanjubek, Deputy Dean of the ASEAN Development Bank Institute, Honorable Chairpersons and Commissioner of Competition Authority in the East Asia region, distinguished panelists and participants from public, private, and academic sector, as well as the audience who join us virtually through the Facebook Live. On behalf of the Trade Competition Commission of Thailand, it's my utmost pleasure and honor to extend a warm welcome to you all to the 15th East Asia Conference, or EAC, co-hosted by the Trade Competition Commission of Thailand, the Japan Fair Trade Commission, and the ASEAN Development Bank Institute. Distinguished panelists and participants, in 2004, the inaugural EAC was established as a vital international conference on competition policy and law in the East Asia region for executive and representative of competition authority in the region, as well as government official, business leader, and academia, to engage in constructive dialogue concerning the topic issue of competition policy and law, with the purpose of strengthening the implementation and cooperation on competition policy and law in the region. As a co-host, the Trade Competition Commission of Thailand, in partnership with the Japan Fair Trade Commission and the ASEAN Development Bank Institute, are grateful to have this great opportunity to arrange the insightful panel discussion in the 15th EAC, enabling us to delve into two topic issues of competition policy and law, namely advancing competition through advocacy, challenges and opportunity, and the importance of effective competition policy and law for the growth and success of MSMEs in the East Asia entrepreneurial economy. Colleagues, I firmly believe that insight, experience, and best practices we will share and learn today would make significant contribution to the advancement of competition regime in the respective economy, as well as to the promotion of international cooperation on competition policy and law. Lastly, I am honored and pleased that the 15th EAC are participated actively not only by competition experts from competition authority in the East Asia region, but also by the representative from sector regulator, relevant government agency, as well as private and academic sector. I would also like to express my heartfelt gratitude for the invaluable contribution made by the panelists to this conference, and I'm grateful and excited for the presentation and discussion at this conference. I'm sure they will yield fruitful and productive outcome. Thank you very much for your kind attention. ขอบคุณครับ
Thank you, Mr. Sutepakun, for your warm welcome and remarks. Next, I would like to invite Mr. Kazuyuki Furuya, Chair of Japan Fair Trade Commission, to deliver the opening remarks.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kazuyuki Furuya, the chair of the Japan Fair Trade Commission. It is my great pleasure to open 15th East Asia Conference on Competition Policy and Law in Bangkok from now. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude and appreciation to Chairman Maitri and the officials of the Trade Competition Commission of Thailand, TCCT, for kindly hosting this meeting. Also, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to Deputy Dean Peku and the officials of the Asian Development Bank Institute, ADBI, for their support in organizing this meeting as well. Since 2004, the East Asian Conference on Competition Law and Policy has served as a forum of presentation and Q&A sessions among participants from academia, the legal field, and competition authorities. Its main object is to build a common understanding of the importance of competition law and policy in the East Asian region. This conference is held as an open event to the public, and it has made great contribution to the public's understanding of the importance of competition law and policy or advocacy activity. Today's conference is now being streamed live and can be viewed from around the world, which will have more advocacy effect than usual. Today, we have two sessions. The topic of session one is advocacy competition advancing competition through advocacy. In order to strengthen competitive policy responding to rapid social and economic changes promptly and accurately, it is important for us to point out new issues under the competition law and policy in various fields in a simple way, and to present ways of thinking and ideal approaches to those issues in an easy-to-understand manner through advocacy. The JFTC has been conducting various fact-finding surveys as a part of advocacy activities. We published the fact-finding report on cloud service in June 2022 and the report on mobile OS in February this year, and report on electric vehicle charging service on expressway in this July. Now, there are multiple ongoing surveys, including survey on the news content distribution and on connected television, as well as on recycling of used PET bottles. Through advocacy, it is important to promote voluntary improvement of trading practices by related businesses and to propose regulatory and institutional review by sector regulators in order to improve the competitive environment. The topic of session 2 is competition policy and SMEs. New and small business ventures, in other words, startups, have the potential to make a significant contribution to increasing the productivity of the economy by promoting innovation. And in recent years, the importance of increasing productivity through business collaboration between startups and large companies has been emphasized. In this context, it is extremely important to ensure an environment in which startups can compete fairly and freely for the future development of the economy. In Japan, the government has made the promotion of startups an important policy issue and is implementing various initiatives based on the Startup Development 5-year plan. The DFTC is also actively promoting initiatives that contribute to the development and growth of startups by conducting a fact-finding survey on open innovations through cooperation between startups and large companies, and survey on IPOs, initial public offerings, from the perspective of strengthening startups' fundraising. Finally, through this meeting, I am looking forward to hearing various suggestions from each perspective of academia, legal field, and competition authorities on the role that competition authorities should play in improving the competitive environment. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Mr. Furuya, for your opening remarks. It is our honor to collaborate with the FTC to host this event. And next, I would like to invite Mr. Sang-Ju Baek, Deputy Dean of Asian Development Bank Institute, to deliver the opening remarks.
Good morning, distinguished speakers, discussants, and participants. Continuing from yesterday, I am honored to join our co-host, the Trade Competition Commission of Thailand and the Japan Fair Trade Commission, in welcoming you to the 15th East Asia Conference on Competition Policy. I would like to express my gratitude to both organizations for their collaborative and resolute efforts in co-organizing this annual conference, which serves not only as a platform for development partners and competition authorities, but also engages the public's interest in advancing regional competition initiatives. On behalf of the co-organizers, I warmly welcome all of you and encourage your active participation in the conference. To promote fair competition and economic productivity, competition authorities must carry through competition advocacy not only to the public but also in the competition regime. Besides promoting fair competition, competition advocacy aims to eliminate anti-competitive practices with recommended approaches that are customized to countries' development levels and challenges. The major approaches include raising awareness of competition law, integrating competition policy into economic policies, and ensuring compliance and enforcement through effective compliant investigation and explanation of enforcement procedures. In relation to promoting the fair competition, it is also crucial to build a level playing field in the market. As we are aware, SMEs and MSMEs are the backbone of many developing economies in East Asia. To support their growth and economic resilience, effective competition policy and laws are vital in driving innovation, product diversity, and service quality in MSMEs production, hence benefiting both businesses and consumers. This requires competition authorities to have a comprehensive understanding of small firms, the impact of competition policy, and successful strategies to support them in competition markets. Today's session will address challenges and opportunities as a part of advocacy that will advance market competition, and will also address the importance of effective competition policy and laws for the growth of and success of MSMEs in East Asia's entrepreneurial economies. I eagerly anticipate hearing your valuable insight, constructive and fruitful discussions, and receiving practical policy recommendations aimed at improving regional coordination and practices. Finally, I extend a warm welcome to all participants and wish you an enjoyable experience at this conference. I hope your active participation will lead to gaining practical knowledge and valuable ideas in competition law and policy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Big, for your remarks. It is also our honor to collaborate with ADBI as well. And please remain on the stage. And as it is mentioned, today we have two sections in total. The first one is advancing competition through advocacy, challenges, and opportunities. And the second one is the importance of effective competition policy and laws for the growth and success of MSMEs in East Asia entrepreneur economies. And next, I would like to invite Mr. Suthepakul to present Mr. Furuya and Mr. Beg a token of our gratitude. The panelist and moderator of today's sections, Assistant Professor Dr. สาธิตาวิมลคุณรัตน์ Mrs. Pakisa Muhammad Junas, Mr. Richie Hutton, Mr. Mingao, Mr. Lê Xuân Thành, Dr. พีรพัฒน์โชคสุวัฒนสกุล Mrs. Marcelina Naring, and Mr. Yasuhiro Yoshikawa on the stage. Before we continue to the next section, let's take a short break and I hope to see everyone back at 9:50. Thank you.
ถ้าเกิดสมมติว่าติดขัดตรงไหน
ได้ไม่ต้องบอกได้
แล้วก็ขัดแล้วไม่ต้องห่วงมันจะหลายรอบก็ได้
ได้ครับ
แม้ไม่มีกลีบกุหลาบโรยงดงามกี่อุปสรรคขวากน้ำก็ตามทียึดหลักธรรมาภิบาลทำหน้าที่ให้การค้านั้นมีเส้นทางแข่งขันทางการค้ายอดปรารถนาคือเสรีและเป็นธรรมมีโอกาสไม่เอาเปรียบเหยียบย่ำไม่กระทำให้ผู้ค้าต้องจาบันผูกขาดตัดตอนอันตรายร่วมกันหัวพิษร้ายไม่แพ้กันใช้อำนาจเหนือตลาดไม่สร้างสรรค์รวมธุรกิจผิดหลักการเรานั้นอย่าวางใจปลาใหญ่อย่ารังแกปลาเล็กช่วยส่งเสริมปลาเด็กให้เติบใหญ่ปลาเร็วหรือปลาช้าไม่เป็นไรขอให้เป็นปลาที่ใช่แบ่งปันค้าขายด้วยไมตรีแม้ไม่มีกลีบกุหลาบโรยงดงามอีกอุปสรรคขวากน้ำก็ตามทียึดหลักธรรมาภิบาลทำหน้าที่ให้การค้านั้นมีความเสรีและเป็นธรรมปลาใหญ่อย่ารังแกปลาเล็กช่วยส่งเสริมปลาเด็ก ความเสรีและเป็นธรรมยึดหลักธรรมาภิบาลทำหน้าที่ให้การค้านั้นมีความเสรีและเป็นธรรมยึดหลักธรรมาภิบาลทำหน้าที่ปณิธาน TCCT เสรีและเป็นธรรมปลาใหญ่อย่ารังแกปลาเล็กช่วยส่งเสริมปลาเด็กให้เติบใหญ่ปลาเร็ว
ถ้าเกิดสมมติว่าติดขัดตรงไหน
ได้เดี๋ยวผมบอก
บ
ได้
อกเลยแล้วก็ขัดแล้วไม่ต้องห่วงมันจะหลายรอบก็ได้
ได้ครับ
แม้ไม่มีกลีบกุหลาบโรยงดงามกี่อุปสรรคขวากน้ำก็ตามทียึดหลักธรรมาภิบาลทำหน้าที่ให้การค้านั้นมีบนเส้นทางแข่งขันทางการค้ายอดปรารถนาคือเสรีและเป็นธรรมมีโอกาสไม่เอาเปรียบเหยียบย่ำไม่กระทำให้ผู้ค้าต้องจาบันผู้ค้าตัดตอนอันตรายร่วมกันหัวพิษร้ายไม่แพ้กันใช้อำนาจเหนือตลาดไม่สร้างสรรค์รวมธุรกิจผิดหลักการเรานั้นอย่าวางใจปลาใหญ่อย่ารังแกปลาเล็กช่วยส่งเสริมปลาเด็กให้เติบใหญ่ปลาเร็วหรือปลาช้าไม่เป็นไรขอให้เป็นปลาที่ใช่แบ่งปันค้าขายด้วยไมตรีแม้ไม่มีกลีบกุหลาบโรยงดงามที่อุปสรรคขวากน้ำก็ตามทียึดหลักธรรมาภิบาลทำหน้าที่ให้การค้านั้นมีความเสรีและเป็นธรรมปลาใหญ่อย่ารังแกปลาเล็กช่วยส่งเสริมปลาเด็กให้เติบใหญ่ปลาเร็วหรือปลาช้าไม่เป็นไรขอให้เป็นปลาที่ใช่แบ่งปันค้าขายด้วยไมตรีแม้ไม่มีกลีบกุหลาบโรยงดงามที่อุปสรรคขวากน้ำก็ตามทียึดหลักธรรมาภิบาลทำหน้าที่ให้การค้านั้นมีความเสรีและเป็นธรรมปลาใหญ่อย่ารังแกปลาเล็กช่วยส่งเสริมปลาเด็กให้เติบใหญ่ปลาเร็วหรือปลาช้าไม่เป็นไรขอให้เป็นปลาที่ใช่แบ่งปันค้าขายด้วยไมตรีแม้ไม่มีกลีบกุหลาบโรยงดงามที่อุปสรรคขวากน้ำก็ตามทียึดหลักธรรมาภิบาลทำหน้าที่ให้การค้านั้นมีความเสรีและเป็นธรรมยึดหลักธรรมาภิบาลทำหน้าที่ให้การค้านั้นมีความเสรีและเป็นธรรมยึดหลักธรรมาภิบาลทำหน้าที่ปณิธาน TCCT เสรีและเป็นธรรม ปลาใหญ่อย่ารังแกปลาเล็กช่วยส่งเสริมปลาเด็กให้เติบใหญ่ปลาเร็วหรือปลา
ถ้าเกิดสมมติว่าติดขัดตรงไหน
ได้เดี๋ยวผมบอก
บ
ได้
อกเลยแล้วก็ขัดแล้วไม่ต้องห่วงมันจะหลายรอบก็ได้
ได้ครับ
แม้ไม่มีกลีบ กุหลาบโรยงดงามกี่อุปสรรคขวากน้ำก็ตามทียึดหลักธรรมาภิบาลทำหน้าที่ให้การค้านั้นมี
The section is about to start in a minute, so if you are ready, please proceed back to your seat. Or if you are still enjoying with the break, you can take some of the break and the coffee back inside as well. Thank you.
ต้องจาบันผูกขาดตัดตอนอันตรายร่วมกันหัวพิษร้ายไม่แพ้กันใช้อำนาจเหนือตลาดไม่สร้างสรรค์รวมธุรกิจผิดหลักการเรานั้นอย่าวางใจปลาใหญ่อย่ารังแกปลาเล็กช่วยส่งเสริมปลาเด็กให้เติบใหญ่ปลาเร็วหรือปลาช้าไม่เป็นไรขอให้เป็นปลาที่ใช่แบ่งปันค้าขายด้วยไมตรีแม้ไม่มีกลีบกุหลาบโรยงดงามอีอุปสรรคขวากน้ำก็ตามทียึดหลักธรรมาภิบาลทำหน้าที่ให้การค้านั้นมีความเสรีและเป็นธรรมปลาใหญ่อย่ารังแกปลาเล็กช่วยส่งเสริมปลาเด็กให้เติบใหญ่ปลาเร็วหรือปลาช้าไม่เป็นไรขอให้เป็นปลาที่ใช่แบ่งปันค้าขายด้วยไมตรีแม้ไม่มีกลีบกุหลาบโรยงดงามอีอุปสรรคขวากน้ำก็ตามทียึดหลักธรรมาภิบาลทำหน้าที่ให้การค้านั้นมีความเสรีและเป็นธรรมปลาใหญ่อย่ารังแกปลาเล็กช่วยส่งเสริมปลาเด็กให้เติบใหญ่ปลาเร็วหรือปลาช้าไม่เป็นไรขอให้เป็นปลาที่ใช่แบ่งปันค้าขายด้วยไมตรีแม้ไม่มีกลีบกุหลาบโรยงดงามอีอุปสรรคขวากน้ำก็ตามทียึดหลักธรรมาภิบาลทำหน้าที่ให้การค้านั้นมีความเสรีและเป็นธรรมยึดหลักธรรมาภิบาลทำหน้าที่ให้การค้านั้นมีความเสรีและเป็นธรรมยึดหลักธรรมาภิบาลทำหน้าที่ปาณิธาน TCCT เสรีและเป็นธรรม
ขอไมค์โพเดียมค่ะขออนำสัมภาษณ์เสร็จแล้วใช่ไหม
ปลาใหญ่อย่ารังแกปลาเล็กช่วยส่งเสริมปลาเด็ก
The section is about to start, so please proceed back to your seat. Thank you. You can also bring the food and also the coffee at your seat as well. So the section is about to start in 1 minute. The section is about to start in 1 minute. Thank you.
แม้ไม่มีกลีบกุหลาบโรยงดงามกี่อุปสรรคขวากน้ำก็ตามทียึดหลักธรรมาภิบาลทำหน้าที่ให้การค้านั้นมี บนเส้นทางแข่งขันทางการค้ายอดปรารถนาคือเสรีและเป็นธรรมมีโอกาสไม่เอาเปรียบเหยียบย่ำไม่กระทำให้ผู้ค้าต้องจาบัน
all got a chance to freshen up during the break. And now let us begin the first panel discussion titled Advancing Competition Through Advocacy, Challenges and Opportunities. In these sections, all presentation and discussion will be moderated by our moderator, Assistant Professor Dr. Sathita Vimonkunarak, Assistant Professor at School of Law, Sukhothai Thammathiraj Open University. And joining us today are Mrs. Pakisa Mohammed Yunus, Principal Assistant Director of the Policy, Strategic Planning and International Division of Malaysia Competition Commission. Next, Mr. Rithi Hutton, Competition Investigations Manager of New Zealand Commerce Commission. Next, Mr. Mingo, Director of Department of the Competition Policy Coordination of State Administration for Market Regulation. And lastly, Mr. Santan Lay, Deputy Director of Competition Policy Board of Vietnam Competition Commission.
Dear Mr. Maitri Suthepakul, Chairman of the TCCT, Mr. Kazuyuki Furuya, Chairman of the JFTC, and Mr. Sang-Ju Baek, Deputy Dean of Asian Development Bank Institute. And good morning, everyone, all our dear distinguished guests. Welcome to today's panel vital discussion on competition advocacy. I am Assistant Professor Dr. Sathita Vimonkunarak from the Faculty of Law, Sukhothai Thammathiraj Open University. It is my great honor to be here as a moderator for this vital discussion. First, I would like to start with introducing overview of this session and its objectives. Competition advocacy is one of the most necessary tasks of competition authorities, particularly in countries that do not have a good background of competition awareness and competition culture. Competition advocacy pertains actions taken by governmental bodies, for example, like competition authorities, to encourage fair competition in the markets and eliminate anti-competitive behaviors. There are recommended approaches to competition advocacy, which vary based on the level of development, unique circumstances, and challenges encountered by each country. For emerging competition authorities, it is important to integrate advocacy efforts into the establishment and development of competition regime. Some young and immature competition authorities also set competition advocacy as a priority task. There are three distinct approaches that competition authorities employ in their competition advocacy. I will briefly tell you about it. So next slide, please. The first approach is raising awareness of competition law and garner support for the competition system. This is a crucial step, particularly in cases where newly enacted or revised competition law and competition authorities. This is a crucial task that I believe that almost every competition authority do this task now. And the second approach is advocating for competition policy, entails integrating the competition regime into the broader economic policy landscape in order to shape the regulatory framework to lessen unnecessary competition restrictive effects and make them as competition friendly as possible, while taking into account the challenges posed by economic development. This approach seeks to harmonize the goals of competition and overall economic progress of the country. This approach will be effective if there is a process of enabling competition authorities representative to give some opinion during the policy making process or the law making process, as well as drafting or reviewing the law and regulations. Existing laws and regulations should also be reviewed whether they cause restrictive competition effects or not. For example, in the United States, the Federal Trade Commission, or we known as FTC, also advocate to promote competition policy in every forum. For example, the national and local legislature, as well as the regulatory agencies. If this kind of aforementioned participation is not possible, what should we do? Then we have other available option, which is enabling the competition authority to meet legislators, policymakers, government, and public authority on an occasional basis in order to discuss their competition concerns. And lastly, advocating for compliance and law enforcement involve identifying area of non-compliance in the law and also enhancing understanding of the role of competition authorities in investigating complaints. And this include clarifying the nature of complaints, the scope of enforcement, and also the potential outcome of competition enforcement actions. Throughout this panel discussion, we will discuss and share many experience from many countries. We have 4 countries now in the competition advocacy, and we also explore its significance, challenges, opportunities, and international best practice in how to conduct competition advocacy. Our esteemed panelists are experts in this field. We will share their insights and experiences, shedding light on the strategies and approaches that have proven to be effective in different contexts of different countries. Before we get started, I would like to introduce our 4 distinguished panelists. The first one is Mrs. Pakisa. She has been with the MYCC since October 2012, and Mrs. Pakisa has a vast experience in investigation, drafting of decisions, undertakings, relevancy involving a range of competition infringement. She also headed the legal division before joining the strategic planning and international affairs division as a principal assistant director. And Mrs. Pakisa leads the secretarial and policy unit, which is responsible in assessment and issuance of policy advice to the government on matters concerning competition. So we got the right person to be the panelist. And the second panelist is Mr. Rishi Hutton. Mr. Hutton is the head of the competition investigation of the New Zealand Commerce Commission. And Mr. Hutton has been responsible for the team investigation of cartel, abuse of market power, mergers, and also consumer protection law. And Mr. Ritchie now has a current law on implementation relating to the new abuse of market power provision in the Commerce Act. And I can see that he has a very wide variety of role in this organization, that he has so many things to share with us today. And the third panelist is Mr. Lei from the VCC. Mr. Lei Tanson has served as a deputy director of the International Cooperation Division, where he established crucial relationships and partnerships with the relevant agencies and international organizations. Currently, Mr. Lei has served as a deputy director in charge of Competition Supervision Board at VCC. And in this role, he leads competition law and policy, handle economic concentration notifications, and foster international cooperation. And lastly, Mr. Ming Guo from SAMR. He is a member of National Working Group on Financial Informatization Standardization, Nation Standardization Committee. He has accumulated study on a work in many fields of law, for example, in the algorithm regulation, in the artificial intelligence, and he also specialized in the law of finance and computers. And these are the brief background of our distinguished panelists today. And today, our panelists will embark on this enlightening journey, aiming to deepen our understanding and knowledge of competition advocacy and its transformative power in fostering free trade and fair competition in the digital society. Without further ado, let's start the first round of intervention from the panelists with the first question, which is, what are the challenges and opportunities in competition advocacy in your countries? So I believe that shall we start with lady first? Mrs. Pakisa, please.
Thank you. Hello, can you hear me? All right. Good morning. Thank you so much. I'm very honored to be here. Thank you to TCC, GFTC, and also ADBI. It's my first time in Bangkok, and so far I've been enjoying the food since the first day I came. I've yet to see the other part of Bangkok. So I'm going to start with my presentation. I'm just going to take you through a little bit of what we have done in MyCC in Malaysia for our advocacy program. So we are actually established on the 1st of April 2011. So we are in 12 years in enforcement. So our main roles, one of it involves advocacy besides the others. So till date, we have issued 86 policy advice, 36 economy advice, 341 advocacy programs, and 7 guidelines. So these are basically our guidelines that we have in existence. There are 7. There are more to come because we are also embarking in our amendments to the Competition Act. So when we talk about advocacy, we have the hard approach and we also have the soft approach. So in MyCC, our hard approach are basically through our enforcement actions. So we have proposed decisions, final decisions, and the softer approach, it's undertaking, whereby normally we target the SMEs to give us undertakings. The next one, MyCC has also done about a few market reviews, about 8 of it. We have embarked in the journey of market reviews because we believe market studies are a very important component for us to actually understand the industry before we can actually find out what is wrong with the industry. So from the market reviews outcomes, we normally advise the ministries, the government agencies, the industry players on what is the right thing to do, what went wrong with, what is wrong with that sector itself. We also have signed a couple of memorandum of understandings with high learning institution. So the aim of this is actually for us to educate the young ones, because education starts from young. So we want the universities people, the students to actually learn competition. So we have actually imposed a few competition subjects in a few universities. We also conduct a best student award in the competition subject, whereby the winners, the top 3, are normally given an internship with MyCC. And if they perform and they would like to further be with us, we will actually recruit them as officers. Depends on the vacancy also. So besides that, we also have a wide coverage of media, newspaper coverage. We often, this is just a part of it, but we have a lot of newspaper coverage. When we do a program, we always issue press release because we believe that's one of the ways how we can reach out to the public. Media coverage also involves television. Our CEO here, Mr. Iskandar Ismail, maybe some of y'all know him in person. He's very active in social media, so he is the face of MyCC. So he is a person that we actually use for to educate people on competition law. The one that you're seeing, he was very famous when we issued the decision on the chicken case. He became instantly famous back then. He was just everywhere over the media. So then we also believe in moving on with technology. So, the world now, it's no more the hard copy newspapers. So we always read news also online. There are TikToks, Facebook, Twitter, and all that. And believe me, MyCC is in all these platforms. Our CEO has a TikTok, and he is very active in his TikTok. He do awareness. He also have, like when we release media statement and all, he also shared in his linking and his TikTok. So do follow us on our social media. This is an e-learning model. It's actually targeted for the SMEs. So we have an e-learning module integrated into our system whereby we ask the SMEs to actually go through this e-learning. There's a couple of questions they have to answer, but there are a synopsis, they have to read a summary. So if they read the summary properly, they will actually understand what MyCC do, what is the role and all that. Later on, they will have a couple of questions where they have to answer. In the end of the day, they will get a certificate of compliance. So they can actually gauge their knowledge, whether how good they know the competition law from taking our SME e-learning module. Now talking about challenges, I believe, you know, advocacy is not an easy thing to do. We are still learning. We are still rather a young agency. So when we speak about lack of awareness, it also starts with our ministry. Sometimes our ministry itself, we are under the Ministry of Domestic Trade. Some of them don't even know what actually their agency is doing. So there's a struggle there, but we are getting there. Like I mentioned before, our CEO is very effective. So we are giving advocacy talks to various stakeholders, including the government agencies, ministries, high learning education, legal practitioners, and further on. The next challenges we have is to actually educate and engage the media on the importance of competition law. You know, sometimes the media reporters, when they come, they only want to capture what they want to capture. So sometimes we have programs where we have media nights, we have engagement with the media, so we advocate them for them to actually understand our program. So when they capture our news, they capture right. And also, I must say that competition law is a very technical subject. I myself, I'm a law background, but I know there's a mixture of economics in competition law. I struggled when I first came. I almost gave up, but I'm still here after 11 years. The technicality of the subject matter itself sometimes is too dry, and so people feel like, you know, sometimes the SMEs mentality, like, we have been doing this thing all the while. Why now suddenly competition law? Are you hindering our business? What is competition law? Why this? Why that? So the subject matter is actually very technical. So if I myself struggle as a law background person, I believe many are still struggling. So it's important. Our role in MyCC is actually to educate them, but we use a better soft layman term so they can understand the message go through. The other challenges that we have is social media platforms. They have their own audience. If you look at TikTok, they are rather shorter videos. You need to have catchy musics, and the content has to be brief, so the message pass by. Twitter, you have to tweet maybe less than 10 words, but it has to be very powerful words that you use. If you use Facebook, LinkedIn rather you can write a bit longer, so you can share more. Telegram, you can share bigger videos. So it's also a struggle for us, you know, to actually look at the content on which platform we are actually sharing. We have to share the right content at the right platform. So just to share a little bit about MyCC's project, we are embarking on amending the law. We are the only ASEAN country who do not have mergers and accusations, so we are going to incorporate that into our amendment. We are also going to embark on competition impact assessment, whereby we are going to make sure it's mandatory moving forward for the lawmakers. When they're going to amend the law, they have to do a regulatory impact assessment, and one of the components is actually to do a competition impact assessment. And then we also have impact assessment on MyCC's cases. Over the years, we have done a lot of cases, so we want to see what are the benefits of these cases, how did the consumer benefited from the cases. So we are undergoing a study with consultants to see how these cases have actually benefited. And lastly, we are moving forward on having a market review on digital economy. So once we get the budget approved, this is our next market review. I have a very short video on TikTok that I would like to share, if it's okay, maybe? Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's such an impressive video that include every kinds of tools that MYCC use in competition advocacy. That's very impressive. Thank you so much. So the next question is Mr. Hutton. Could you please tell us about the challenges and opportunity in competition advocacy in your country?
Sure, thank you. And I'd just like to thank the TCCT, the JFTC and the ADBI for organising today's event. So competition law focuses on the conduct of market participants that lessens competition. But in fact, competition can also be lessened by government policies, and that harm can often be more enduring and widespread than the individual instances of non-compliance with competition law. So there certainly is real benefit in competition agencies advocating to ensure that government policies do not increase barriers to effective competition. Now, it's also important that consumers and businesses understand the benefits of competition and support the competition law framework. Businesses are more likely to comply with competition law if they understand and accept the benefits it brings. But there are challenges associated with competition advocacy. These include the complexity of the topic and the limited understanding of many of our stakeholders, that competition considerations are often competing with other objectives, that it's hard to measure and demonstrate the impact of our interventions on markets, and as an economy-wide regulator, rather than a sector regulator, competition agencies have a diverse range of stakeholders. At the Commerce Commission, we prioritise our stakeholders based on their level of interest and influence in our work. We identify those stakeholders with high influence and high interest in the competition system and manage them more closely. In this way, we direct our efforts towards the areas where we will have the most impact. We also survey our stakeholders so that we can better understand their attitudes to competition and also to our role in enforcing competition law. And this also helps us to focus our advocacy and engagement. So I'm just going to talk about two examples of advocacy that demonstrate the challenges and opportunities, and they are examples where we've thought about the characteristics of the stakeholder and audience and how best to tailor our advocacy intervention. So the first example relates to our role to advocate for competition to be taken into account when government agencies are considering policies that affect the functioning of markets. And this is particularly important in markets where interest groups or affected parties might have an interest in limiting potential competitive outcomes. This might arise where markets are concentrated or in markets with strong professional industry associations. Now, the New Zealand Commerce Commission does not have the primary responsibility for advocating for competition policy. That primary responsibility is the role of a separate ministry. However, given our expertise in dealing with the practical application of competition law, our insight is usually sought. And the form of our involvement varies. Sometimes it might be formal. We might provide a formal written submission in response to a formal consultation process that's being undertaken by another government agency, or it might be informal. We might simply meet with a government department to help them understand the implications of competition, implications for competition. But this is ad hoc, and it relies on either ourselves or the relevant policy agency identifying a competition issue. The challenge for us is to ensure that competition is routinely considered as part of the government policy process, that there's an expectation that the impact on competition will be considered. To achieve this, we need to make it easier for policy officials to take into account competition impacts. It can be challenging for officials with other important priorities and limited competition experience to assess the impact of policy decisions on competition. So to address this challenge, we developed our competition assessment guidelines. These guidelines promote competition and the achievement of policy goals. The guidelines explain why competition is beneficial in a way that is accessible and tangible for public officials who are not experts in competition law. They highlight how important It is to prevent unnecessary restrictions on competition that can be costly and time-consuming to fix later, and they explain how policies can impact competition using real-life examples. So there's a full version and a quick guide on our website. We also provided training. To date, we've trained about 400 officials. But the main message of our campaign was that competition should be in the room when officials are determining policy. We recognise that sometimes competition policies have to take a back seat, as there are often other policy objectives that are more important, such as health or the environment. But the objective of our engagement is to ensure that competition is at least in the room when discussions are happening. In other words, that it is still taken into account and the trade-offs are clearly recognised. Now, a real success of this initiative has been that the Government Treasury is now considering adding as a requirement, an assessment of competition to the government regulatory impacts assessments. So one more example. Another advocacy challenge that we face is to foster support for the introduction of new or amended laws. Now, recently, our abusive market power provision was amended to introduce a substantial lessening competition threshold. And as part of that reform, the intellectual property right exemption was repealed. Now, one challenge that arose as part of that reform was the level of apprehension to the new laws. Some of our competition legal community and some of the large corporates felt that the change was unnecessary. They felt the existing test for abusive market power was straightforward to apply. A new test added complexity that would increase compliance costs. So there was also a level of uncertainty about how the new law would be applied. Likewise, the removal of the intellectual property exemption was a cause of concern. The primary concern being that the removal of the exemption might stifle incentives to invest. It was always our intention to draft guidelines to improve awareness, education and compliance with the new law, but in this instance, the guidance was particularly helpful in addressing this apprehension about the change. So we reviewed submissions provided to Parliament to identify the exact concerns and who held those concerns. The concerns suggested the guidance needed to be more detailed than usual. We needed to focus the guidance on specific types of behaviour and the factors that we would take into account in assessing that conduct. Businesses also wanted to know what types of conduct did not breach the new provisions, so we included examples of such conduct too. We also consulted on the drafts and met with those parties who continued to express concerns, and as a consequence of that consultation, the final draft was improved and better met the needs of our stakeholders. The guidelines were well received, and we think that they have successfully reduced the level of anxiety. So those are two examples of what can be achieved with advocacy, and they evidence the real opportunity but also the challenges.
Thank you so much, Mr. Heston, for sharing us our formal consultation and also informal consultation, and also the ad hoc meeting to identify the competition issues, which is another way to competition advocacy to the government and also the public authorities. And you also mentioned the successful case of competition advocacy as well. I think this is the best lesson learned from other competition authorities. And next, Mr. Lei, please.
Thank you. It's my very honor and to be here to share some experience for the advocacy activity in Vietnam. And I could give some information about the background context in Vietnam now. The first competition in Vietnam was introduced in 2004, and after several years, I think it's about nearly 15 years, the law was reviewed and to reflect change in the economic landscape as well as the development of the new technologies. So in the result, the new competition law was enacted in 2018. The new competition law and the new competition agency. The VCC was established in the last April. So we should be the first group as Dr. Sativa has mentioned, the new and revised competition law and new agencies established. I would like to share some, maybe I would don't need to emphasize anymore about the importance of the advocacy on competition. I just share some key points. First one, awareness and education. Advocacy play a vital role in raising awareness among businesses, consumers, and government officers in Vietnam about the importance of fair competition. By conducting educational campaign and workshops, advocacy efforts can enhance understanding and compliance with the competition law regulation. The second one is stakeholder engagement. Effective advocacy entails engaging with various stakeholders in Vietnam, including business, industry associations, consumer groups, and academia. By involving these groups in the policy making process, advocates can gather valuable insight and build the consensus of pro-competitive measures. The third one is capacity building. Advocacy can contribute to building the capacity of the VCC and another relevant agency involved in enforcing competition law. By providing training and technical assistance, advocacy efforts can enhance the effective of competition law enforcement in detecting and combating the anti-competitive practice. The fourth one, international cooperation. Nowadays, competition is not an issue of a single country, and competition advocacy can extend to the internal cooperation with the other country and other international organizations. By sharing best practices and knowledge can strengthen the VCC framework to facilitate the cross-border cases. About the challenge and opportunity, we just focus on two challenges and two opportunity. First one is the lack of resources and expertise. That's the same with the first speaker have said, and advocacy play a vital and very specify knowledge and resources, so including access to data, economic analysis, and legal expertise. In some cases, there may be limited resources available to conduct in-depth market study, so economic impact assessment or engaged expert, which can hinder the effectiveness of the competition advocacy. Second one is limited awareness and understanding. One of the significant challenges in advocating for competition legislation in Vietnam is limited awareness and understanding of the competition law among the businesses, consumer, even in some policymaker as well. The opportunity, the first one I would like to share about the government support for advocacy. Maybe advocacy efforts can be encouraged by support from the Vietnamese government and relevant government body. With the government backing, competition advocates can have a more significant impact on shaping policy and regulation to support the fair competition. The second one, VCC opportunity is clear vision of the leader. A dedicated leadership at the VCA can provide a clear vision and strategic direction for the competition advocacy. By setting specific goals and priority, the leadership ensure that advocacy efforts align with the overall mission to promote fair competition and to protect consumer welfare. And I finish here.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lei. I believe that there are many competition authorities that also share the same and common challenges that you mentioned. This is about the lack of resources and expertise, and also the limited background of competition awareness and competition culture. But it's good to hear that you have the government support for competition advocacy. Thank you. And next, we are moving to Mr. Gur. Could you please share us?
Distinguished guests, I'm Ming Guo from the Competition Policy Coordination Department of China State's Administration for Market Regulation, SAMR, which is also a part of China's National Anti-Monopoly Administration. I'm happy to be here and share about China's recent work to improve competition. In 2022, China updated its anti-monopoly law for the first time in 15 years, with a focus on encouraging innovation and ensuring fair competition. In the same year, China dealt with 187 monopoly cases according to law, which led to fines of 784 million RMB. We also reviewed 794 business concentration cases, and 5 of them were allowed to continue under certain conditions. This helped maintain fair competition and making China's business environment better. We have made sure that the results of important anti-monopoly cases are publicly accessible to help companies learn and avoid legal problems. For example, when we were investigating the CNKI monopoly case, we publicized the full details of penalty decision and invited experts to explain the case on newspaper and TV. We encouraged relevant companies to publicize their corrections measures to allow for public supervision, and they created 15 correction steps in 5 areas. In 2022, we improved business compliance, helping companies and industries to manage themselves and prevent monopolistic behaviors. This helped maintain health market to facilitate growth. We also helped develop a new enterprises competition compliance management system, which guides competitors to proactively comply with the law. Dear friends, experience shows that vitality and order are like 2 wings of a market economy. Without order, the market economy cannot survive. Without vitality, it cannot thrive. Competition gives market vitality, while fairness creates order. We need to focus more on protecting and encouraging fair competition. This will be help bring vitality to the market, streamline the economic activities, spark new ideas, and drive strong economic growth. Compliance and fair competition are basic requirements for enterprises. They are also essential for getting the most benefits and long-term growth. If we look closely, we see that enterprises can prevent big problems and hidden dangers by focusing on following rules in their internal operations. Healthy competition leads to strong growth. If we look at the bigger picture, the more compliant the enterprises are, the better the overall market environment will be. This ensures that all market players can compete equally, interact in a partnership way, and grow together. I want to share a few thoughts on how to activate fair competition. First, we need to really believe in the idea of fair competition and build an enterprise competition and a compliance management system. We need to keep deepening our understanding of the legal system, clarify the roles of competition in business growth strategies, build a solid compliance system, strengthen internal competition management, and achieve orderly competition and steady growth. Second, we need to focus on the real effects of compliance and encourage integrating competition into business operations. We should include competition in various aspects like business operations, investment, etc. This will help regulate business activities and turn the soft power of fair competition into the hard power of strong development. Third, the government should give more guidance in competition, helping enterprises improve their competition management. Recently, regulators and international organizations from various countries have been tightening rules on compliance. China State's Administration for Market Regulation will keep studying the issues of competition, give more guidance of enterprises, and help improve the efficiency and the level of competition management. Fourth, we need to promote a culture of competition and increase public awareness of fair competition, improve transparency in law enforcement, and create a conducive environment for fair competition. Dear friends, we hope to communicate more with you and learn from each other. We also warmly welcome you with us in China in the near future. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mingguo. I believe that many participants are looking forward to hear from China. And it's glad to hear that you're using the first approach of competition advocacy in order to raise competition awareness and competition culture as well. And now we are moving to the second round of the intervention. Before we move to the second round, I would like to share some brief backgrounds on this session. According to my research under my doctoral thesis, the International Competition Network identifies the requirements of effective competition advocacy as follows. Visualizing the competition advocacy activity, it is the necessary task because appropriate competition advocacy activity and techniques must be selected to conform to the nature and the interests of different target groups in order to maximize its impacts. And the selection of tools and activities depend on the type and also the degree of competition knowledge of the target groups. Competition advocacy is the main tool to raise competition awareness and competition culture. And it is also important to conduct competition advocacy for other economic policy to take into account competition concerns and make them as competition friendly as much as possible. And lastly, competition advocacy can help competition compliance and law enforcement as well. So this is also the brief of the first approach, the second approach, and also the third approach. So now I would like to hear from you that what kinds of approaches of competition advocacy that your competition authority used to conduct competition advocacy. Maybe it can be the combination of every kind of approach, or maybe you focus on specific approach. So I would like to start with Mr. Hutton. Could you explain more on advocacy activities to support competition law compliance and enforcement?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. So advocacy and enforcement are complementary tools in a competition agency's regulatory toolkit. When we find instances of non-compliance, we need to decide which of those tools to use. To do that, we have to understand why it might be that businesses are not complying with competition law. Many businesses want to comply, but sometimes they don't know they had to, or they don't know how to. Such businesses just need some education to nudge them into compliance. A competition agency can achieve a lot by using advocacy to help business to comply with the law. Ideally, an agency would use a hierarchy or graduated approach. An agency should use advocacy tools with regulated parties that do want to comply but don't know how to, and move to more coercive and costly enforcement measures only when education and engagement fails. By using a wide variety of tools, we can use our limited investigative resources efficiently. Now, advocacy is also crucial at the end of an investigation process or at the outcome of court proceedings to amplify the deterrence impact of an enforcement outcome. So, for example, following an investigation of anti-competitive conduct in the veterinary profession, we issued a public warning to a rural veterinary clinic. The warning related to an agreement with a competing veterinary practice that the competing practice would not supply a particular product. But more generally, evidence gathered during the investigation also indicated a wider risk that the sector was not complying with competition law. There was evidence of extensive communications between competitors. We found that a number of parties had very low competition law awareness. So we took advantage of the increased awareness of competition law generated by the public warning, and we worked with the industry association to agree the most effective ways to communicate with the profession. We published a series of articles in their industry magazines, drafted an information page on the association website, and worked with individual veterinary practices. Advocacy is also a useful tool where a competition agency is concerned about a type of conduct rather than a particular sector. So, for example, we currently have underway proceedings relating to the use of a land covenant in the building products sector. We allege the covenant prevented a competitor acquiring land to build a competing store within close proximity. This type of conduct was also identified as a concern in our retail grocery market study, and we have a number of open investigations there. But this level of investigative enforcement activity creates a high level of awareness about the risks of using land covenants, which is in itself a good thing, but it's important that we follow up that heightened awareness with guidance, and this is to ensure that those businesses who do want to comply know how to. Now, another good example of the relationship between enforcement and advocacy is the role of advocacy in lead generation. In 2020, we developed a cartels campaign for the purpose of ensuring that businesses were aware of the change to criminal sanctions for cartel conduct. The target audience was SMEs, and it involved use of radio, social media, and online news platforms. The campaign was called Scene of a Crime, and that language and imagery strongly and quickly referred to the potential for imprisonment. We used display advertising and short videos to show practical, real-life examples of the types of conversations between competitors that could be cartel conduct. But in 2022, we ran the campaign again. We changed the focus to raising awareness of the ability to report a cartel. We used a new slogan, "See it, report it, stop it." And we did market surveys before and after the campaign to determine its success. And it was successful. We observed an increase in understanding amongst the target audience of the fact that they can report the cartel conduct to us, but importantly, from an enforcement perspective, there was also an increase in reports regarding potential cartel conduct through all of our reporting lines. That is, through our call centre, anonymous whistleblower tool, and our leniency process. So I think those are two good examples of the interplay between advocacy and enforcement. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think this is a very clear examples, and thank you so much for sharing your experience with us. And then, Mrs. Pakisa, we understood that MYCC works on competition policy to support MSME. Could you please explain more on competition advocacy activities to integrate the competition regime into the broader economic policy landscape, including MSME, in promoting policy, please?
Thank you for the question. Like I mentioned earlier, I think SME comprises 90-something% of the business in Malaysia. So we struggle at first to educate the SMEs, but we are getting there. If I can just share two examples. One of it's on our market review. If I can get the slides on, please. Okay, for the market review, if we just focus on the 2019 and 2020, the 2019 we conducted a market review on the food sector whereby we interviewed all the players. We focused on 5 items which were mustard leaf, cabbage, mackerel fish, infant milk, and beef. So when we want to understand, it's not easy for us to understand the industry, so we had to go down and interview the SMEs. So there was a lot of engagement with the SMEs in order for us to come up with the market review. And this market review was one of our best market review, whereby the key takeaway was actually adopted by the Ministry of Agriculture. The next one is on the market review for service sector. In 2020, we were hit by the COVID-19 pandemic. When we did a research, we found out that 93% of the Malaysian SMEs were not ready to digitalize their businesses. But now, after 3 years, when we talk to them again, they are actually more ready. Even if you go to the night market now, you can actually buy something and you can QR code them. That means they are already, the awareness is there, they are getting there. The SMEs understand the importance of digitalization because it's important if we want to move forward, we have to move forward with technology because technology is the thing right now. The next example that if I can share is on the e-learning module. Like I mentioned before, this is our e-learning 1.0. We are now coming up with e-learning 2.0 and 3.0. This e-learning for 1.0 is actually just custom-made for SMEs. 2.0 and 3.0, when our competition amendments goes to Parliament and we have the merger powers, one of our e-learning will be on mergers and accusations. So during, we have one case, if I can share a low-hanging fruit case from a tuition center, whereby we actually impose a penalty on the tuition centers, but one of our direction to them was for them to complete this e-learning module. So it was compulsory for them to actually complete and send us the certificate of completion. But the fine, they still have to pay. So it's just that one of the ways that for us to actually make them, because if you tell people go to the e-learning module, MyCC has an e-learning module, they will just listen, you know, from the right ears and come out from the left ears. So we make it compulsory as one of our direction in our cases, that it's compulsory for them to actually take this e-learning module. So we hope that with this e-learning 1.0, 2.0, and 3.0, we can actually educate the SMEs. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next.
I would like to share some kind of activity that we have done so far. At least we share about the strategy for the competition advocacy, the different approach, and for the different stakeholder. It depends on if we want to improve the agency coordination and policy harmonization. We need to clarify responsibility of the competition agency and regulator. So the tool should be the technical assistance and training or roundtable discussion. If we need the enhancing business compliance, we might focus on facilitating corporate compliance and maybe the leniency program. The consumer group benefit from awareness raising campaigns and advocacy materials, while the academia and researcher may benefit from data analysis and study report. For us, maybe the best effective tool for the advocacy, maybe the social media, like MyCC has applied, right? And we have done a lot, but I have never listened a song from the commissioner like TCCT. Do you mind if you can compose another song for the VCC in the yeah? I do like the song, the Big Fish song, right? Yeah, I think it's very attractive for the advocacy when the consumer and the public can understand about our message. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lei, that you mentioning about the song composed by our commissioner. Okay, next is gonna be Mr. Ming Guo. Could you please share us your competition advocacy strategy in China, and do you use TikTok like Malaysia and also the Vietnam in competition advocacy?
I introduce more work about China. In 2022, we held the first China Fair Competition Policy Publicity Week, which had the theme of Unified Large Market Fair Competition for the Future. We carried out 100 promotional events, both online and offline, across the country, showing the achievements of 10 years of fair competition policies. These events were very well received by enterprises. Our charity ads on WeChat during the competition week were viewed almost 1 million times. And our poster and related topics on Weibo were read nearly 3 million times. Platforms like Toutiao, Douyin is TikTok in China, and Kuaishou had over 11 million views each, boosting people's perspectives and confidence. We have focused on training and improving the skills of our anti-monopoly team. We organized training series on fair competition policy implementation and anti-monopoly law enforcement, helping the team understand the newly updated anti-monopoly law and improve their law enforcement capabilities. We developed 5 anti-monopoly courses and sent staff to some provinces, cities, and companies to communicate to and train over 1,800 people. The annual reports of the anti-monopoly law enforcement in China 2022 that I had in my hand records China's work on anti-monopoly law and competition over the past year. Anyone interested interested can contact my colleagues, Mr. Li and I. We are very happy to share with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mingguo. With the enormous viewers from social media, it clearly shows that you have like successful competition advocacy in China. And then I think that maybe we still have time for one question. Is there any question from the floor? I believe that you can scan the QR code and you can post the question to the panelists. Is there any question? Or maybe you can raise your hand. So if there is no question, I think I would like to sum up this interesting session. Today we have learned that many competition regimes on how to conduct competition advocacy in many ways and many approaches to raise competition awareness among business operators, public, as well as raising concern on the importance of competition to government and also to the other public authorities in making policy and laws. And of course, there is no one size fits all for the strategy for competition advocacies. But now it seems like today we can find something in common for the way to conduct competition advocacy and make it successful. For example, like the use of social medias and make it more interesting for the public at large. So we can see from almost every competition authorities, they can now turn to use more social media like Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, and also everything, YouTube. And many commissioners maybe become the YouTuber and also the TikTokers as well, which is a good way because we should use this social media and make the younger generation know about the competition law and also its significance. And last but not least, according to the international best practices, impartiality and effectiveness of competition authorities in the eye of public and also private sectors also affect the capability in competition advocacy as well. Another point is adequate resources in carrying on the competition advocacy is also another important issue for the young competition authority. Therefore, to strike the right balance in devoting resources in performing both enforcement and also competition advocacy at the same time is also the very big challenge for the young and immature competition authorities. I believe that competition advocacy is an essential task for every combination of competition advocacy, regardless of the development levels of competition regimes, but the approaches and to create effective competition advocacy may be various and should be tailor-made to different target groups and the level of competition culture in each country. And this kind of conference is also another kind of competition advocacy as well. And I believe that today we have a very fruitful discussion on competition advocacy. On behalf of all panelists and the host, I would like to thank you so much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you for the insightful discussion. And next we're going to have some of the token of gratitude. So could you please step up a little bit? And in this section, we have learned from like 4 authorities in total and about the advocacy. And I have learned that the advocacy is very crucial to promote the fair competition culture, not only to increase awareness, but also support competition law compliance. And so, Mr. Somsak Kietchailak would be the one who presented panelists and moderator a token of our gratitude. Firstly, to our moderator, to Mr. Lei. Next, Mr. Mingo. Next, Mrs. Pakisa. Next, Mr. Richie. And lastly, Assistant Professor Dr. Satita. And lastly, a group photo together, please. Thank you so much. Thank you. Now, how do you feel about the first section with 4 authorities who speak about the advocacy? It's very interesting, right? Some of us already have the social media to promote the advocacy to raise awareness, and some of us also have the advocacy to support the competition law compliance. It's very interesting. And the next section is going to be about the support for MSMEs, and we're going to have one of our speakers come in online as well. And after that, we're going to have the lunch break, and then it's going to be the cultural tour. And for the cultural tour, if you can indicate about whether you would like to go to the cultural tour, or after the cultural tour you would like to go to all the place, or you would like to come to the hotel. You can also inform us as well. You can inform the staff at the back. And next, I would like to invite our moderator for the next section. The next section is going to be, as I mentioned, is about MSME, but the title is The Importance of Effective Competition Policy and Laws of the Growth and Success of MSME in East Asia Entrepreneurial Economies. And so I would like to invite the moderator, Dr. Pirapashok Suwatanaskun, Affiliate Professor at Faculty of Law from Chulalongkorn University. And then our speaker, Dr. Vimonkan Kosuma, Deputy Director General of Office of Small and Medium Enterprise Promotion. And Mrs. Marcelina Nering Adiarina, Director of Competition Policy of Indonesia Competition Commission. And Mr. Yasuhiro Yoshikawa, Director of Trade Practices Research of the Japan Fair Trade Commission on the stage.
All right. Good morning. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Pirapat. You can call me Yok as well. That's pretty much the name I go by. Today, as a 15th East Asia Conference on Competition Law and Policy, it's truly my honor to be on stage here with our distinguished panelists. We actually have 3 panelists today, but one of them will join us online. But first of all, I would like to express my gratitude towards all the hosts of this event, the chairperson, chair of the organizing committee of the TCCT, JFTC, and ADBI, and also commissioners, ex-commissioners, and ladies and gentlemen. So welcome to the second session, in which we will talk about the importance of effective competition policy laws for the growth and success of MSMEs, which are micro, small, and medium enterprises in East Asia entrepreneurial economies. So I think we will learn different perspectives from 3 countries, 3 jurisdictions. We're going to learn from Thailand. So let me start by introducing 3 distinguished panelists. I will start with Dr. Vimonkan Gosumat. She is a Deputy Director General and of the Office of Small and Medium Enterprises Promotion, or OSMEP, or SMEP of Thailand. She's joining us online over there. She used to be a speaker at the National Legislative Assembly of Thailand in 2016 and also the chair of the SMEs working group at the APEC between 2013 and 2014. And the second guest is Mrs. Marcelina Nuring Ayarini. Can I address you as Nuring for short? Thank you. So Nuring is the Director of Competition Policy of the KPPU, or the Indonesian Competition Commission. She serves at KPPU for over 20 years already. And I believe that the KPPU was founded in 2000. So you have, if I understand correctly, was it? Yes, so you were there at the very beginning, from the very beginning. Wow. So I think we're going to learn a lot from that. And last but not least, with us here on the leftmost side is Mr. Yasuhiro Yoshikawa. He is the director of the Trade Practice Research Office at the Japanese Fair Trade Commission, or the JFTC. And he previously served as the head of the Digital Platform Investigation Division, which worked in so many notable cases, including Airbnb and Rakuten cases. And I think today we're going to learn from your fact-finding survey and guidelines on startups, which is going to be super important. All right, I would like to give this sort of like brief introduction to the topic, because I think it's very important that we understand at least the big idea of, the importance of MSMEs, particularly within this region, this part of the world. Some of the data that I use might be a bit narrower than the scope of our audience today, but I think it would reflect certain sort of picture so that we understand the importance of it. We understand why competition law and policy would play a big part in it. All right, so I would like to pretty much convey 3 messages briefly. I have like roughly 7 minutes, and then we go on to the first intervention. Each of the speaker would have 7 minutes for the first intervention, and then we come back to the Q&A on the second intervention. So the outline is this: 3 messages. The first is MSMEs are utterly indispensable for this region, not just Thailand. And the second thing is larger firms still dominate this region. And the struggles between these, I'm not saying that it just have to be the fight between larger and smaller firms. But what I'm trying to say is the dynamics between these 2 categories of firms are really important in this region. And last is why it matters and what's the deal in it. Right. So the first message is MSMEs are indispensable, super important in this region, which I think we're going to hear from our panelists as well, that within each jurisdictions, MSMEs serve as a main powerhouse for the economies as well. You look at these numbers, I would like to point out certain kind of like observations. One thing is, if you look at the East Asian Pacific, which is the main region, the focus of today, we see the largest numbers of SMEs active in this region. I've got this data from World Bank. You see that 5%, which basically means that if you have 20 people standing, one of them is likely to run an SMEs, let alone working for them, right? Because that is larger amount. Because if you look at the number of the firms, again, that's cover 90-ish% in all, pretty much most of the jurisdictions. And the share of total employment is quite huge, especially in this region. It's 67% of employment. So whatever happened to these firms happen to the majority of the population. All right. And share the GDPs. Well, I have two sort of like quite similar numbers, but they are from different sources. For the World Bank, it say that the share of the GDP of the MSMEs, and that of course depends on the way that you measure and how you categorize MSMEs, is roughly 40%, right? So for East Asia alone, the MSMEs is contributed to 42% of the GDP. I just extract some of the numbers from the Southeast Asian region, which is a subset of the bigger picture. You can see that the share of the GDP of the MSMEs is accounted for roughly 40 to 60% of the GDP of these countries. All right. In Thailand, it's roughly 42%. That is quite big. And if you look deeper into detail, you're going to see some of the jurisdictions who have some firms who are sort of government-run and relatively big. And most of the time, they are not competing against firms who are run privately. So that is going to sort of reflect a clearer picture there as well. All right. East Asia MSMEs are contributing to 62% of the workforce. All right. If you look at some jurisdictions, for example, Thailand is roughly 86% of the employment are shared by the MSMEs, right? And that you see how significant it is when it comes to the MSMEs in terms of the employment and the welfare, the population. That's the first image. I think we sort of see quite some picture there. And the second message is the larger firms still dominate. If you look at pretty much the same line of data, you see that large firms in East Asia are accounted for roughly 80% of the total value added. And I think today we're going to hear some stories about the sort of vertical struggles, vertical relationship between firms upstream and downstream. And we know that in so many circumstances, that is pretty much the relationship between the bigger firms and the MSMEs. I think we're going to hear the case of Indonesia and Japan, especially on that front, which is super interesting, right? But see that the larger firms are pretty much having 80% of the total value added, and that will contribute to the bargaining power, and that is something that we're going to discuss later. And if you look at the share, we zoom into Thailand. The 10 largest companies in Thailand in terms of revenue are accounted for 27.6% of the GDP. If you look at other jurisdictions like the US, China, or Ecuador, I specifically picked out Ecuador because of the GDP per capita that is quite close to Thailand, if not the closest one. And you see the difference there. And this is, I think we all know that this kind of like inequality in terms of the distribution of wealth is pretty much a big agenda in the global arena at the moment, all right? And again, if we zoom out again and have a look at the contribution of the MSMEs, this is particularly in Thailand, to the export value, it's just roughly 11.4%. So another 88.6% are responsible by bigger firms. Right, so larger firms are still quite powerful, and the last message is why it really matters. As I said, it's not about being big or being small, right? It's just more about the dynamic of that coexistence, how they actually interact and treat each other. And we know that one of the strengths of MSMEs is that ability to innovate. And that is because they are more flexible in general. They are more adaptable and they are relatively customer-oriented. And that is from the research. There seems to be some of the strength that MSMEs possess over bigger firms. But that is a conditional advantage, right? We know that some of the conditions have to be in place. The access to finance and supplies, the skilled human resources, and the supportive policies and regulations. That is pretty much at the heart of the conditions that MSMEs require. It is even more subtle than that, right? We talk about the whole competition policy and competition law as the risk-shifting device in the economy as well. Which again, because I mean, a lot of theorists and a lot of economists say the startups, which we're going to talk about, is pretty much the engine in which you sort of move the R&D function of the company, of the larger firm, into the public space, and the government is actually supporting that R&D space. So the one who bear the cost is pretty much the whole society, and the one who actually bear the fruit of it would be the bigger firms when they exit and they become the success story. So that is pretty much the risk-shifting device, and that is subject to the redistribution, whether the innovation would eventually go to the benefit of the people or not. And that is at the heart of competition policy law, let alone the rent-seeking entry, which is getting more and more difficult the larger the firms are. And that would basically go to the political economy of the competition policy and competition law as well, which we know that is very important. So that's pretty much the introduction that I would like to give. And I think today we're going to have an opportunity to learn from experiences of our panelists. We're going to learn the design scope with clear objectives, which are super important in any jurisdiction. I think it's important as well that we're going to learn how capacity and independence of the CA or the competition authority will matter in this MSMEs promotion and also their support. And last thing, I think we're going to learn also from the awareness of MSMEs and the participation and empowerment of MSMEs in the policies making and also the implementation of the policy. So that's pretty much something that I would like to begin with. And I would like to, can I start with Dr. Vimonkan Kosumat, who is joining us online. I think she's going to share the situation here and the role of MSMEs in Thailand and why competition policy laws will play a big part in it. So the floor is yours, Dr. Vimonkan, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pirapat, for your kind introduction. Distinguished delegates from East Asia competition policy agencies, very good morning to all of you from Jakarta. First of all, I would like to thank the host agency, OTCC, for having me here and for engaging the Office of SMEs Promotion, or OSMEP, in this highly important gathering of East Asia competition policy agencies at the time when competition policy is playing a very critical role in promoting growth of the MSME sector. In 2022, UNSCAP published a policy guidebook on MSMEs development in the Asia Pacific, and for the first time identified competition policies as one of the most impactful measures to facilitate MSMEs post-pandemic recovery. The guidebook also stressed that the coordination between competition policy and MSMEs agencies is highly important to regional MSMEs growth. Within this pretext, I wish to represent MSMEs in identifying their important roles in the economies, together with some of their challenges, and how competition policy agencies can help address their challenges. Probably this is a replicating of what Dr. Pirapat has just said, but different statistics from the United Nations. 90% of business worldwide are MSMEs, and they account for more than 50% of employment and around 40% of GDP across economies. Meanwhile, MSMEs are playing a critical role in driving innovation in all sector areas, ranging from food production, manufacturing industries, logistics, services, EV, medical device, biotechnology, software, and AI. And MSMEs are also sources of new technologies to large firms. Lastly, MSMEs in the informal sector is proven to play an indispensable role in cushioning jobs and provide food and services at affordable price to the population living in the base of the pyramid worldwide. And this can be seen clearly during the period of the pandemic. With these roles, MSMEs are being considered the backbone of all economies. Operating with dominant presence of large firms, MSMEs are facing serious difficulties in 4 key areas. First, new market entry is highly difficult for dominant presence of large firms. Take Thailand, for example. Currently, 3.1 million MSMEs in Thailand account for 99.7% of total businesses and almost 80% of the country employment. But they can capture only 17% of domestic market share, leaving 83% of the market share to large firms. And MSMEs themselves are feeling that their market share is expected to decrease further as larger firms can make better use of digital technology in penetrating new markets faster than they do. In Thailand and all over the world, MSMEs are being advised to avoid heavy concentrated, oversaturated domestic markets and switch to foreign markets, while large firms enjoy easier operations of expanding domestically. Secondly, MSMEs are losing their competitiveness after being hit by 2 crises, the pandemic and the energy price crisis, following the Russia-Ukraine wars. After being hardly hit by the pandemic, MSMEs are heavily debt-ridden and therefore too slow to invest in new technologies, particularly energy-saving technologies and automation, which can help larger companies overcome the rising energy cost. A research on regional innovation in Thailand by the OECD a few years ago highlighted that the large companies in Thailand have much better access to R&D researchers than smaller firms. And the very presence of the very large firms has discouraged innovative startups across sectors. Thirdly, MSMEs typically have difficulties accessing talents and skilled laborers, and they always lose highly skilled workforce they train to larger firms in the same industries. With the coming of the digital transformation, this gap is further widened as MSMEs all over the world cannot compete with large firms in attracting digital talents. Finally, cost of fund is higher for MSMEs than large firms. Not to mention access to finance in general is more.
Excuse me, Dr. Wimon, we can't hear you. Could you repeat the last part again, please?
For how long?
Since
1 minute?
since the gap between the larger firm and smaller firm, and you talk about the access to finance of the smaller firms, which is another problem, and then we lost you from there.
I'm sorry. Okay. The cost of fund is higher for MSMEs than large firms. Not to mention access to finance in general is more difficult too. In Thailand, MSMEs, who represent 99.7% of all businesses, accounts for only less than 30% of total bank loans before the pandemic. With all these challenges facing MSMEs, OTCC and the Office of SMEs Promotion had worked together in coming up with the baseline market share data of MSMEs in Thailand. With the baseline data, Thailand's most recent 13th National Economic and Social Development Plan for the first time, identified competition policy as one of the key strategies in assisting MSMEs development. Specific KPIs on the linkages between competition policies and SME development were also introduced in the SME development section of this 13th plan. These KPIs require new regulations and guidelines to be issued by the OTCC to improve the business environment of MSMEs within the 5 years timeline. So far, OTCC guidelines have improved fair trade and market competition conditions for MSMEs in 4 following issues. First, the shortening of credit term period imposed on MSMEs by large firms from up to 6 to 7 months to no more than 45 days. Second, a guideline to ensure fair treatment of franchisees by franchisors. Third, a guideline to prevent commission fee being overcharged by food delivery platforms. Fourth, a guideline to address monopoly behaviors and unfair price practices among wholesale fruit buyers. All 4 guidelines were well received by MSMEs associations and communities for creating better playing fields for MSMEs. Yet, they still encourage the next steps of competition policy office engagement in the following areas. First and foremost, MSMEs make their decision based on existing market and competition conditions. They wish to have competition agencies monitor and report closely the market share data and take prompt actions to prevent over-market dominance and anti-competition behaviors. Second, the presence of dominant firms itself threatens the fair competitions, and MSMEs wish to have a close monitoring and reviewing of merger and acquisitions in the market by competition agencies. Third, MSMEs are still unaware of competition laws and are unsure how the law can assist them. Outreaching to MSMEs and advocacy programs are much needed. Next, MSMEs are increasingly rely on digital platforms for their marketing channels and for reaching their customers all over the world. But they have no bargaining powers against platform operators' unfair practices, and they need public intervention on this issue. Finally, we have a recommendation by UNESCAP on strengthening the role of competition policy through the practice of having joint forum between SMEs and competition policy agencies, which I think we are already doing it at this particular moment. In case of Thailand, the OTCC and OSMEP is scheduled to sign an MOU to foster cooperation between the 2 agencies to better address various barriers and anti-competition behaviors affecting MSMEs on August the 7th, so just a few days from now. Having said that, I once again thank OTCC and all competition policy agencies present here for your kind attention and devotion to foster fairer trade competition practices so all firms, regardless of size, can thrive equally. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Raymond Kant from the Office of Small and Medium Enterprises Promotion. I think we learned a great deal, right? We learned a great deal of how MSMEs face challenges here in the context of Thailand, whether getting into new market, resilience when it comes to crisis, or the ability to get access to finance and talents, which I think we're going to hear from the other jurisdictions as well, that I expect that probably the struggles would be sort of like quite similar. So without further ado, may I invite Kun Nuring for your kind intervention, please.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I want to say thank you to TCCT, JFTC, and ADBI for inviting KPPU to this conference. What we got these 2 days will be definitely very useful for us. Before we jump to the presentation. I would like to apologize that my presentation today will be a little bit different from the printout material that you have. Okay, maybe I will start. 99% of business in Indonesia are MSMEs. The contribution of MSMEs to the GDP and labor in Indonesia is relatively high. In some crises that occurred, the MSMEs had played an important role in stabilizing the Indonesian economy. It is why that the MSMEs in Indonesia are important. On this opportunity, I would like to deliver some information regarding to the condition of MSME in Indonesia and how KPPU took part in developing and protecting MSMEs. One of the objectives of competition policy in Indonesia is to create a conducive business climate through regulation of fair business competition, so as to ensure certainty of equal business opportunities for large, medium, and small business actors. All levels of business actors definitely need a conducive business climate. So it can be created by ensuring a level playing field, preventing monopoly behavior, encouraging market entry and reducing barriers, providing support for innovation and technology adoption, promoting market transparency and information sharing, and offering dispute resolution mechanism. It is difficult for MSMEs to compete with large enterprises due to limited financial resources, scale disadvantage, limited market presence and brand recognition, lack of resources and expertise, regulatory compliance burden, access to markets and distribution channel, and limited bargaining power. So all parties involved can play their roles, including MSMEs, who can play an active roles by increasing their understanding of fair business competition and healthy partnership, with an expectation to protect themselves from any abuse of higher bargaining position held by larger enterprises. So KPPU received 2 mandates from 2 laws. Law number 5, year 1999, is given the task for supervising business competition, where in the law it states that MSMEs are exempted from the enforcing of competition law, because theoretically MSMEs are, as a small party, unlikely able to win the competition with large enterprise. It means that MSMEs still need protection in order to develop. At the time when there was only law number 5, the support for MSMEs were mostly carried by KPPU through policy recommendation. Until finally, the law number 20/2008 concerning MSMEs was established and gave the mandate for KPPU to supervise partnership. The law provides flexibility for KPPU in supervising abuse of bargaining position. So long story short, KPPU established a new unit to handle the problems in partnership between large enterprise and MSMEs on 2016. The problem that is often found in our analysis is about imbalance. The first is that MSMEs as competitor must face unequal playing field. Secondly, MSMEs as supplier face unequal bargaining power. Regarding the issues of on unequal playing field, there was an issue about disproportionate competition between modern and traditional retail. KPPU recommend that the implementation of policies and procedures covering procedures for location, spatial planning, legality, social environment, and operating hours can be immediately perfected and made effective by each local government. Due to this, KPPU's recommendations have been set forth in a regulation of Minister of Trade. Regarding the issues on unequal bargaining power, KPPU once provided recommendation related to unequal bargaining power regarding partnerships in chicken farms, partnerships in oil palm plantation, which essentially request the partnership can be carried out in a balanced manner and based on an open transactional principles. Even though it took quite a long time, currently the Ministry of Agriculture and KPPU have formed a partnership oversight task force. Secondly, KPPU once provided a recommendation to arrange the main points of cooperation agreements between supermarkets and their suppliers to mitigate the unequal bargaining power. This recommendation was followed by the drafting of regulation by the Minister of Trade. So after going through quite a long deliberation, currently KPPU includes partnership supervision into the corridor of law enforcement. However, the emphasis is on changing behavior. In order to obtain change in behaviors, KPPU provides the opportunity for parties deemed to have violated the provision of owning and controlling to improve their behaviors. These improvements can be made starting from preliminary inspection to the issuance of a behavior change order. The order is given by means of a warning letter. The warning letter can be given 3 times. During this process, KPPU will monitor how the responsive of each party given the warning and will stop the law enforcement process if the points considered as problems in the implementation of partnership have been reviewed. Thus, the law enforcement process does not have to come to a verdict of guilty or not, including the imposition of administrative sanction. This is because KPPU realized that partnerships are actually needed to coexist as well, so that punishment will only be given to those who really do not admit their mistakes. Up to now, from 20 cases that have been decided and still in process, 16 cases been completed with determination. If I could give my one-side claim, this can indicate that the purpose of law enforcement for behavior change have been successfully implemented. Okay, lesson learned from times to times are as follow. Low understanding of business actors regarding equality in partnership relation, regulations on the implementation of partnership that are not yet comprehensive, lack of ongoing monitoring and evaluation of partnership implementation by relevant sector regulators, and lack of coordination and synergy between government agency and MSMEs readiness to partner is still low. The KPPU's role is to promote a market structure that guarantees fair business competition and protect consumers, as well as preventing market domination and business concentration. Meanwhile, KPPU's authority to supervise partnerships comes at the end to supervise the implementation of partnership. Prior to that stage, many things could have been done to encourage partnership and provide guidance to related parties. Law 20/2008 assigns responsibility and requires coordination between government agencies. Guideline and supervision of partnership in Law 20 is the responsibility of several ministries. Healthy business partnerships require the readiness of partnering business actors so that efforts to empower and foster as well as regulatory support are needed. So for this reason, synergy is needed between government agencies that have authority in developing and fostering MSMEs and government agencies that have the authority to supervise the implementation of partnerships. Guidance and development is needed to realize the readiness of business actors in implementing partnerships, while regulation and supervision are needed as regulatory support to provide legal certainty and carry out business activity. Okay, I think I will stop here. I hope this sharing is useful for countries that have conditions similar to Indonesia. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mrs. Marcelina Noring Jarini from the Indonesian Competition Commission. I think this is interesting when you talk about the approach of behavioral changing. How would you use this as like maybe more lenient approach and more understanding approach towards the conduct by firms? And also, I think it's super important as well about the cross-government agencies coordination and cooperation, which I think is probably reflected from Thailand as well, because we have this SMEs promotion agencies here with us as well to work with the Competition Commission. So next one is going to be interesting as well, because we're going to learn from the startups perspective in the Japanese through the Japanese lens. And may I invite Mr. Yasuhiro Yoshikawa to present to us the fact-finding surveys and guidelines on startups. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I am very honored to be here as a speaker today in this session. Today, I would like to talk about the JFTC's efforts regarding startups among SMEs. And I also would like to introduce the guideline that JFT published last year based on the result of its survey focusing on startups. Thank you very much. The reason why the JFTC focused on startups is that they are very important for the future Japanese economy. They not only improve efficiency through innovation, but also play an important role in job creation. So the Japanese government as a whole consider it important issue to improve the business environment for startups. And the JFTC is also working on startups, contributing to government overall policies through competition policy. There is no clear definition of the term startups, but we define it as that less than 10 years old and unlisted and in an emerging market. Now let's see the differences between startups and the SMEs shown in the left lower boxes. In the field where startup operates, sufficient demand has yet to emerge. So startups temporarily post a deficit in early stage, but they increase their sales significantly in the short term. This is so-called J-curve. In contrast, SME grows linearly by gradually expanding its scales, and they acquire the fund by receiving loans. But startup cannot do that because of their deficit in early stage and because of the uncertainty of the demand in the market. So the only way for startup to acquire the fund is the investment. Then the investor are quite important for startups. The light box shows the growth model of startups. In seed phase, they mainly engage in R&D, and in early phase, they sell the initial product. In middle phase, they may need back offices because of the increase of their sales. In later phase, they prepare for exit. It is IPO or M&A. In each phase, they may need the investment to proceed to the next phase. And next slide shows the status of the startups in Japan. Upper left box shows the number of the unicorn company in each country. The number of unicorn company in Japan is still 7. It's a very small number. And the upper right box shows the changes in the amount of the investment in startups in Japan. It seems to be growing steadily, but in the OECD statistics, it is different, shown in the lower boxes. Lower left boxes, it is the venture capital investment in 2013. The Japan's venture capital investment in 2013 was 1.9 billion. It was only 5% of those in the US, but Japan is still second in OECD member countries. But if you see the ratio of increase from 2013 to 2021, shown in the lower right box, Japan is the lowest in the OECD member countries. And the government's policy is to increase this amount. And what can the JFTC do to achieve this? So then we have to understand the current situation and take necessary measures to deal with it. And next slide shows the relationship between startups and partners and startup and investors. Upper box shows the relationship between partners and startups. Their relationship starts with NDAs and proceed to proof of concept agreement. And next would be joint research agreement, and last is licensing agreement. And the lower boxes show the relationship between investors and startups. The venture capital and startup conclude the investment agreement at first, and the startup acquire the funds through investment. In our survey, we found there is a tendency of startup to be subordinated in terms of substitutability due to their lack of financial resources, credit, labor, and time. Now, let me briefly explain about our regulation on abuse of superior bargaining position. Next slide. Thank you. There is 3 factors: act of abuse, unjust in light of normal business practices, and superior bargaining position. With these 3 factors, the act is considered to be the violation under our competition law. And in the survey, as I explained, we found a tendency of partners and investors to be a superior position against startups. Next slide, please. Thank you. We have conducted interviews and written surveys of startups and its counterparts, partners and investors. And we found there are some conducts that could be the violation under our competition law. Blue box shows the problematic acts in the transactions between partners and the startups. And the middle box shows those in the transaction between startup and investors. And we developed a guideline in response to these problematic acts. Next slide, please. Thank you. The guideline is so extensive, so today let me introduce just 2 examples of the guidelines. The first example of the guideline is concerning NDAs, breach of an NDA. We described the problematic act in the upper boxes. In this case, breach of an NDA. In case 7, the big company ignored the NDA with startups, and the startups couldn't do anything against it. In the middle box, we described the way of thinking under competition law. In this example, we said it may fall under interference with the competitors' transactions. And the lower box, this is the most distinctive part of this guideline. In this box, we provide advice or proposals for startups to deal with problems. In this example, we proposed for startups to specifically identify confidential information in advance for proving the breach of an NDA, and also to provide for the scope of liability for damages in advance. This is a very concrete advice or proposal for startup, which must be very helpful. But this concrete advice is beyond the competition law. This is beyond the discretion of competition agency. So we collaborated with the other ministries such as METI, a Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, and the Japan Patent Office to create this, this context. Next slide, please. The second example is concerning joint research agreement. Unilateral attribution of intellectual property rights. This is a very typical issue concerning startups. In this example, we say it may fall under abuse of superior bargaining position. And our proposal for startups is to consider attributing intellectual property rights to startups and setting exclusive right with a certain limitation for partner businesses. This is also a very concrete proposal. It may be difficult for competition authority to make this kind of proposal alone. And our guideline also provides the links to the model contracts that provide the appropriate example of typical clause of the contract concerning startups. The model contract is available on the website, and the startup can refer to it easily. Lastly, the JFTC have already conducted the follow-up survey on the awareness of this guideline. The result is the awareness of startups is insufficient, but we also found some cases in which the startups used this guideline to improve the unfavorable condition in the contract. I was very happy to hear this. And lastly, the JFTC will continue its efforts to make this guideline known to startups and public. This is the end of my presentation. Thank you for your kind attention.
Well, thank you, Mr. Yasuhiro Yoshikawa from the JFTC. I think it's really interesting. You talk about this relationship between investors and business partners and startups, who by size would be considered as MSMEs. But again, by the nature of industries that they are active in, there are so many unique characteristics that they possess as well. And that is, I think we learned from your guidelines that you have to treat them differently as well, right? So I think that's very interesting. Okay, so now I think it's time for the Q&A. We do have roughly, well, I would say 5 to 10 minutes. I think we open for the questions from the floor as well, if you would like to forward any questions to the panelists. But in the meantime, I would like to begin with maybe, could I start from you first, Mr. Yoshikawa? Because you ended your presentation with this sort of relationship between investors and startups as MSMEs who are active in relatively innovative and technological intensive industries. Are we talking that about, and it seems to be quite sort of, I don't know, it's quite preeminent and sort of like eminent to me that the investors or business partners seems to have sort of greater bargaining power against startups. Is that always be the case in your sort of in your view? And the second question is this guideline more of the warning towards the investors, or it serves pretty much more sort of other purposes as well? Yes, please.
Thank you very much for your questions. Yes, there is many investors in many sectors, but it remains difficult for startups to find new investors. This is because the investor tends to operate in a specific sector. So the number of investors is still limited in a given sector. And the startups do not have enough time and resources to search for new investors throughout the sector. And also, we do not have found any specific superior bargaining position. We just find a tendency. So it may be a little bit difficult to actually find a superior position in an individual case. And the purpose of the guideline is to alert both sides, partners, investors, and startups. And we want to encourage them to engage in full discussion to create mutually beneficial relationships. And the most important thing is to make sure that this guideline do not demotivate the investors. It could be the opposite effect. So we should clearly explain that this guideline reduces legal risk of investors.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much. So, Nurind, can I redirect the question to you when it comes to Indonesia? Can you elaborate a little bit more on the sort of what you call the behavioral change approach? How do you actually concretize it in practice, and what are potentially pros and cons of it? Yes, please.
Okay, maybe I want to talk first about the number of cases and then
please.
About that. Out of 20 cases that we handled, 16 cases have been become determination, and 5 cases have become decisions, and 2 of them were found guilty by the KPU. Let me give you about the question about the 2 examples in palm plantation and online transportation partnership. So some of the problems in the implementation of oil palm plantation partnerships include the preparation of partnership and supervision of plasma, the implementation of development, management, and supervision of plasma need does not involve plasma. And planning, preparation, and implementation of financing unilaterally without involving the plasma and unpaid plasma income. There are several problems in the partnership. So after going through the partnership monitoring process at KPPU, at the ending with the determination, it is acknowledged that plasma has had a positive impact, including increased productivity of plasma land, increased plasma income, and increased the welfare of plasma farmers. Plasma gets transparency of financial reports, and plasma become more skilled in managing oil palm plantation after receiving technical guidance. And second, I would like to give the example about some of the problems in the implementation of online transportation partnership. They include the agreement can be changed without the driver consent, and then discrimination in bonus schemes, and there are burdensome requirements and imbalance of rights and obligation of the parties, problem in standard operating procedures on suspend and termination for drivers. So after going through the partnership monitoring process at KPPU and ending with the determination, it is recognized that now the driver have received positive impacts, including more comfortable in carrying out their work with establishment of two-way communication, and there is no more unilateral disconnection, and gain access to convey input or aspiration regarding changes to the code of ethics.
Thank you very much. I think we still have like 5 minutes, if I understand correctly. Do we have a question from the floor? Yes, please, this gentleman in the middle. Please, could you kindly introduce yourself before asking questions as well?
Sure. Thank you, Petirap. My name is Dr. Pierre Horna. I am from ESCAP, from the UN Conference Commission for Asia Pacific. Before, I was part of the UN Conference on Trade and Development for many years. And I would like to first thank the chairman, the judge, Mr. Maitri Sutagapul, for the kind invitation extended to us. I wanted to talk about this topic because last year, when Dr. Kosumas talked about this, she precisely mentioned the event that we held here in Bangkok in June, particularly on this topic on competition on MSMEs. I was then part of UNCTAD, and together with ESCAP and TCCT, we developed these guidelines that Dr. Kosumas mentioned earlier in the presentation. And I'm very happy to see how this topic has been developed over time, seeing that the agreement is going to be taking place now in August between OSMEP and TCCT, and I am very happy to see that. I'm now no longer working on competition issues in ESCAP, as ESCAP doesn't have the mandate to work on that. However, we work now on climate finance related issues. And from this perspective, and that's, we'd like to have a couple of questions to the speakers today. When we talked about these guidelines, we also launched in that particular event last year in June here in Bangkok. We talked about these best recommended practices to incorporate startups or MSMEs in digital markets. And these guidelines talked about how and to what extent MSMEs can be protected in the digital marketplace. The problem, of course, as we highlighted in these best recommended practices, is that, as also was mentioned by the distinguished representative from KPPU in the original law number 5 for 1999, you said clearly that MSMEs were exempted from competition rules. And that's one of the main challenges we had when we had this project in mind. This project started during the pandemic times when everybody was aggressively going into digital markets. MSMEs, in order to survive, had to change their views, had to change their way of working to aggressively go to the digital marketplace. But guess what? They enter into a number of uncharted waters. And that's where I am happy to see how government coordination has been taking place in many of the countries of the East Asia community, particularly in the case of Thailand, which is very, very important. But the question, and this is a question for the two speakers, and also for Dr. Kosumas, if she's still online, is where do we go from here? You see, I remember the first time we talked about this topic at the beginning of 2020, there was a representative from the Lao MSMEs agency that said, how can we protect this small little enterprise if there's no specific tools to protect them? We have guidelines now in Japan. We have specific agreements that are going to be signed by TCCT and OSMEP in Thailand. We have a new law in 2008 in Indonesia. But at the same time, concretely, the work of competition authority has been there to protect the dominant firms, has been to protect market power, to actually make sure that concentration of markets do not necessarily impair the effective competition. So therefore, the idea on this new way of thinking on post-pandemic is that MSMEs are rightly in the digital marketplace. They have gained experience on how to navigate to these waters. And nowadays, what else competition authorities could do? And then I recall something that we heard in our national consultations with all these countries that we work in the region, particularly the Philippines, where they talked about a sort of like a coordination mechanisms between the Ministry of Commerce that had a specific MSMEs cooperation framework in times of crisis, where competition authority were indeed or the Competition Commission at the time, the PCC, has invited to be part of it. So it's an interesting way of moving forward. But it is indeed a very important area of work because the pandemic showed us that the digital marketplace will stay, whether we want it or not. Here we have a hybrid conference, and this is an important area in which MSMEs are still struggling around the world on how to deal with the digital markets, with the established digital techs that are actually impairing their work and their survival in many of the cases to continue their operations. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Dr. Juana. I think that's very interesting. If I may, I would like to sort of recap it, and that's actually the question I would like to end with as well. It's pretty much what we're going to do sort of going forward, like what is the way forward from here, especially when we see that it's not just the existing challenges that MSMEs are facing, but also sort of new terrain, like the digital market or the digital platforms that MSMEs around this region and actually around the world are participating in. What is the next step from here? If we're going to get out there and roll our sleeves and get back to work, what should we do? So who would like to take it first? Yes, please.
Short. Okay. Thank you. Our agency is still young in the taking care of partnership supervision. So maybe about the law enforcement, we just do it from 2020. So we still looking for the right form of the next step that we have to take. So in this time, we are still coordinating with the other ministries under the coordination of the presidential staff. And maybe that's all that I can answer. And I hope that Mr. from GFTC will satisfy to you. Thank you.
Sorry, but my answer is also very short. And in our survey, I explained the startups is mostly operate in the digital market. So the guideline I explained is important tools to help startups in digital market to grow more. And another things, the competition authority should pay close attention to big techs to protect SMEs from the dominant, the acts that can be the abuse of superior bargaining position. But I'd like to point out one more thing, that the policies that protect SMEs is very important, and that have a good political reception, and it also have good public reception. But we should be careful because the excessive protection of one side could result in a smaller market because it demotivates the counterparts. That's all for me.
Well, thank you very much. I myself do learn a lot, and well, I would like to, again, just to a quick reflection of what I learned from your experiences is I think probably two things. One is we really need to understand the context, right? I think when I teach competition law, I always emphasize that the first thing is you can do whatever you want, as long as you know what you are doing. And that's pretty much applicable here as well. In competition law, as long as you know the objectives. And if your objective is clear that you would like to protect MSMEs, then the measures and the policies would follow, right? And I think the second thing that I learned greatly is we really need to understand the dynamic of the industry in order to be able to regulate them properly. Well, thank you very much again, Dr. Bimon Kosumat from the OSMAP of Thailand, the Office of Small and Medium Enterprises Promotion. Mrs. Marcelina Nuring Ajarini from KPPU, or Indonesian Competition Commission. And last but not least, thank you, Mr. Yasuhiro Yoshikawa from Japan Fair Trade Commission. Well, thank you very much for all the audience and participants for your kind effort and attendance as well. Thank you.
Thank you all for the fruitful discussion. We have discussed a lot about the support for MSME. And I would like to invite Dr. Rakesha Shashai, the Commissioner of TCCT, to present the panelists and moderator a token of our gratitude. Firstly, for Mrs. Marcelina. Next, Mr. Yoshihiro. And lastly, Dr. Pirapat. Group photo, please. Thank you so much. And I would like to also express my gratitude to Dr. Vimongan for accepting to share the knowledge and experiences regarding the support of MSME in Thailand. Even though now she is in Indonesia for her meeting, so she have to leave the meeting earlier to attend another meeting in Indonesia. And in this opportunity, I would like to encourage everyone to evaluate the meeting. Your opinion and advice would also help us, the host, very well for the next meeting. And the evaluation form is in this meeting materials in the second page. The QR code is the second one. And finally, we prepared some small gift for the participant, which is the photo from yesterday. And if you have not received it yet, it is available at the registration. As you can see, that the picture is the group photo that we take from yesterday, the 18 EA Top. And also, if you're interested for our song, The Wheel of TCCT, or The Big Fish and Small Fish with the subtitle, you can also request us as well. We will send it with the subtitle to you through the email again. And if you have any more questions or anything that you need for us, the host, you can also tell us to do, and we will try to facilitate it to you with that. And next, and finally, ladies and gentlemen, we have arrived at the conclusion of the meeting. To deliver the closing remark, I would like to invite Assistant Professor Dr. Wisanu Wongsin Sirikun, Secretary General of TCCT.
Distinguished panelists and participants, as we have come to the end of the 15th EAC, I stand before you on behalf of the Trade Competition Commission of Thailand, co-host of this conference, with a profound gratitude and admiration. I would like to extend my heartfelt appreciation to our esteemed panelists for their crucial contribution to the 15th EAC, and to all participants for your active participation. Throughout this conference, we have delved into the crucial topic of competition policy and law at the present time, emphasizing pivotal roles of competition policy and law in promoting economic efficiency, growth and development, spurring innovation, ensuring consumer welfare, as well as fostering a level playing field and fairness for business. The discussion today will not only benefit competition authority in advancing the effective implementation of competition policy and law, but also serve the interests of all stakeholders and bring them to support and reap the rewards of competition policy objectives. Moreover, I'm pleased that the 15 EAC clearly signify the importance of cooperation on competition policy and law at both national and international levels. By sharing our diverse perspective, best practice and lessons learned, as well as by further strengthening our cooperation, we could shape a future where competition thrives, economies prosper, and consumer welfare is enhanced. In closing, I would like to again express my gratitude for your contribution and participation. To representatives of competition authority in East Asia region who travel to join us, I hope that you all will get a chance to explore Bangkok and Thailand. I also wish you safe travel back to your home and look forward to meeting you again in our future endeavors. Thank you for your kind attention. Thank you very much indeed. ขอบคุณครับ
Thank you, Dr. Wong Sin Sirikun, for your closing remarks. And in this regard, I would like to also express my gratitude to JFTC and ADBI for kind cooperation and making the event run smoothly. And not to mention all delegates from East Asia and representatives from sector regulator and relevant Thai authorities and also TCCT for your active participation. And lastly, thank you our staff from TCCT, Atmosphere, and also Nico Bangkok Hotel. And I would like to inform you that it's time for us to take a lunch break. The lunch will be served at Oasis Room on the 6th floor. And for the delegate from Competition Authority from East Asia who are interested to join us for the cultural tour, please meet at the lobby at 1:30. We will depart immediately. And finally, thank you everyone and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.